Dear Harstem, the CIA can't be stopped. Charge-slot Immortal Archon timings. Normally, I would not blame balance, as I like to ponder what would a pro player do, and try to overcome the problems in my play. However, this time is different. I fought against the same 5.2k Protoss player, a friend, on the ladder who went the exact same 2-base Charge-slot Immortal Archon, also known as the CIA, all-in, for all 6 games we played. I lost every single time. I know it's coming, but I can't stop it. Even when I noticed from the replays and tried to exploit the lack of early units in his build, he still managed to barely hold and then overwhelm with the KO timing attack, despite having lost all his workers at his natural. It's ridiculous. He gets 5 Immortals, a couple of Archons, and then 8 gate endless charge slots with +1, and he just A-moves at around the 7 to 8 minute mark. Pure Roach Ravager dies. Roach Ravager Banes and Links dies. And it's not like I can really tech the lurkers that early without leaving gaps in my build order. I know my control in these fights aren't great, but is that really the only thing that is screwing me over? We're both playing from Asia to the NA server, so there's some lag, question mark. Am I getting too many drones? Question mark. Is my unit combat? Question mark. Is the only way to hold the push to somehow snipe the War Prism? Question mark. How is it that I can have complete knowledge of what is coming, but still not be able to stop it? Question mark. I asked him what he thinks I should do, but even he is clueless as to how Zerg can beat it. He says he copied the build order from Astrea in a game where Solar died to the timing. I am frankly at a loss at how to handle this build. Please advise me, Captain. Is it Imba or do I suck? I have 6 replays of me trying out different things against this build. I will just submit the one in which I held the longest, with a proxy hatch blocking his natural to slow this build. This was written in parentheses at the bottom of the imbalance complaint form. The person who submitted it is called Code, I think. Race is Zerg. The league is Master. He's a 4.8k player at the time of writing on the North American server. So that being said, let's hop into the game. Code in the top right as our red Zerg player with this beautiful Blizzard employee spinning around the hatchery, and in the bottom left we have Leo, a beautiful 3-letter name. I think Leo also means lion. I'm not quite sure if that is true, but that's my feeling with the name. It's the name of a lion, that's for sure. This guy is opening up with a Gateway Scout, which is extremely enlightened, and I like it. At the same time, we see this drone move around the map and actually trying to get the block that we were talking about, or that the guy was talking about in his imbalance complaint form. So, so far this actually looks good. Just straight out of the Bly playbook, a classic 3rd hatchery on the opponent's natural. Now, many people might not be aware of this, but there was a time in StarCraft 2 where this was relatively common, and I want to kind of do a throwback there to the Sioux games at Intel Extreme Masters Katowice in, I want to say 2019? Or 2018, I think it was 2019, where every single time against Protoss, or at least a lot against Protoss, he would open up with 3 hatch before pool, with the 3rd hatchery not being on his own 3rd base, but on the opponent's 3rd base. And because of that, I have quite some experience with this build, at least from the Protoss side. I know how to respond with it, and I know what's annoying to play against. So as a Protoss, the appropriate response tends to be to pull 4 workers and to chrono boost a Zealot out. That way you can take out the hatchery without it finishing and without there being any creep whatsoever on your natural. And that is obviously the entire goal. The Zerg, if this hatchery goes down anyway, most likely still will be slightly ahead. It's a good situation for the Zerg, but only ever so slightly. And as the Protoss here isn't really pulling a lot of workers, I think here it would be the correct call to actually finish this hatchery. That way you can delay the opponent's nexus for a long time. With the creep. And at the very end, because some larvae will spawn from the hatchery, you can build overlords from it. Ooh, Evo Chamber. Hatchery cancel into building an Evo Chamber is probably a good call if you're being attacked by 4 or 5 workers and a Zealot, and you can't finish the hatchery with a lot of HP, like with 300-400 HP. So I think this was a mistake, and it kind of defeats the purpose of the build. You're not actually blocking this Nexus for very long with it. It is still a reasonably timed block, and you save a lot of money because you don't finish the hatchery. But I actually would have preferred you finishing the hatchery there. But this is a minor detail. I still think your opening is fine. Your opponent is getting a second gate as well, which is quite frankly terrible for Protoss. Whenever a second gateway gets built... Oh no, never mind. There's already tech out. I was gonna flame him for getting a second gateway before tech, but this Protoss actually knows how to play the game. He was 5-2 as well, so that makes sense. No, it's a proper thing. He is slightly supply blocked, so the prism is delayed, and that is bad, obviously. We also still see you mining with 2 workers in gas. This is kind of stupid, and this is especially bad because you already invested a lot of minerals into blocking your opponent's hatchery. The moment you're mining gas early in the game, there needs to be a plan with that gas, because gas is a very expensive resource to get. I've discussed this many times, but the only way for any of the races to gain economy is to spend minerals and to get minerals. So more minerals means more economy. Queens, overlords, drones, hatcheries, extractors, anything that can create economy requires minerals. So the more mineral mining you have in the early game, the better it is for your economy. If you want to become more aggressive in the early game, or you want to tech quick or get quick upgrades, getting extra gas is very useful. But right now you're floating 160 gas, which you don't need at all. Like, what are you going to get? A Baneling Nest? A fast +1? You want to rush to layer? No, of course not. I like the Roach Warren, but you don't need to have 300 gas ready by the time that Roach Warren finishes. That is completely useless. You can't produce freaking, 12 roaches at this time in the game. You don't even have the minerals for that. So the ratio between the gas and the minerals right now is completely off. And usually I don't mind as much, but you're a 4.8k player that is high masters. You're probably pretty close to grandmasters, especially on NA. You should be aware of how the mineral to gas ratio works at this point. This is kind of sad. Now, if we look over at the Protoss, we also see that Protoss has a lot of gas, but for Protoss, this is understandable because the race works differently. Often for Protoss, you need to initially bank up gas so that you can later either use it in sentries if you're going for some type of 2-base push, or for Templar, Colossi, Disruptor, or later on upgrades. You can't as easily just take 8 gases at the same time, saturate all of them, and get an insane increase in gas income like Zerg can. You're also getting a Baneling Nest after you get the Roach Warren. And this actually is a mistake. And I'm going to explain this. And I'll draw an analogy with moving into a new house. So when you leave your parents' house for the first time, when you're maybe 18 or 26 or 35, no matter how old you are, you will be facing the reality of having to buy a set of pans and pots. Everyone needs to buy these because you need to cook somehow. Now, the Roach Warren is kind of the 5 or 7 pans and pot sets that you can get at the IKEA, okay? It's a very useful thing to have. You're not a great cook, most likely, so they will absolutely suffice. Like, this is your primitive pots and pans, nothing too fancy. It's the same in StarCraft 2. The Roach Warren, it helps you defend against most things extremely well. The Baneling Nest is more like an air fryer. It is a very specialized tool that should never be your priority. And if you have limited funds, like you do right now, as you're only on 41 workers, you can't afford an air fryer at this point. You can't afford this Baneling Nest. We should be sticking to our IKEA set of 7 pots and pans. You know, you get your saucepan, maybe 2 frying pans, and then 2 of these pans with the pots with the lids on it. You can boil your potatoes in it or make some nice soup. This air fryer is way out of your budget at this point. On top of that, you're also taking a second gas, which is kind of understandable if you're getting a Baneling Nest, because you obviously want to be spending the gas, but you shouldn't be getting the Baneling Nest, and thus you probably also should not be getting this gas quite yet. You want to be getting this gas as late as possible to once again increase your mineral income for as long as you can. Another mistake that you're making right now at this point is that you don't have a Ling over here scouting for anything. So you are extremely aware that your opponent does not have a third base, although I wouldn't mind if you scout around a little bit to make sure there's no proxy base, but you are not quite sure if your opponent is moving out or not. So that means that you're forced into building units that you don't need whatsoever. Your opponent isn't moving out. The beauty of Zerg is that you can respond to what you see. You don't have to blindly do things. You literally always have map control, either with Where's your Overlord, by the way? It's not here. I guess it got taken out by the Prism, maybe? Prism and a Stalker, perhaps. Anyway, with Lynx, you can also see a move out happening. By the time the Protoss leaves here, you have about like, what, 35 to 40 seconds before this slow, sluggish army makes its way to this position or to this position. Plenty of time to get Roaches out, to morph Ravagers, to morph Banes. Morphing Ravagers and Banes ahead of time is completely nonsensical. There's no point. The morph time of these units is so low that if you have a scout here, you will always be able to get these units out in time. So these are resources that you're investing into something that you cannot be using yet. It just makes absolutely zero sense. Like, you're just wasting money. You could either be getting more drones, you could be getting more queens. If you're not sure what's happening as a Zerg player, but you want to be safe, what you can do is you can build drones and queens. And if you already have like 7 to 8 roaches, like you do in this case, that's great, because then the moment you see your opponent move out, you just morph your roaches into Ravagers, you start unit production, you have the maximum amount of drones that you can have, and you have a crap ton of queens, which are great at, well, everything really. Defense, offense, spreading creep, transfusing, keeping yourself alive, killing air units, killing ground units, tanking against ground units, tanking against air units. They can inject, so provide more larvae as well. They look pretty cool. And you have 2 massive things on their head, like 5 arms or something like that. They could really beat you up in a fight. I'd like to see the Queen against Floyd Mayweather. And when I'm talking about the Queen, I'm not talking about the old British lady, because I think Floyd Mayweather would definitely have that. But, you know, this Queen, the Zerg Queen. I don't think Floyd Mayweather would be having such a good time, especially if there's a couple of carapace upgrades on this. Take a couple of hits. So now this army moves out, and this is when you should be building units. So you probably should be. You asked, did I build too many drones? And I think the answer is no. You didn't build too many drones. Maybe you even built too little drones. But most importantly, you built the drones that you built too late, because you were too focused on building banelings, roaches, and well, mainly banelings and ravagers and other things that you didn't really need at that point in time yet, which you could have known if you just had scouted. So your opponent starts moving out. I actually do believe you have a fairly good defense setup, honestly. Like, despite the baneling nest being a luxury earlier in the game, 7 minutes in on 60 workers, yeah, I think getting a couple of banelings is fine. Now, I do have to admit that getting 25 banelings against a push like this is a bit much. The baneling is one of these units where it doesn't really matter whether, especially if you're trying to kill zealots, it doesn't matter so much if you have 10 or 35 in this case, because you're most likely going to be capable of blowing up the zealots, and you won't be capable of blowing up the Archons. You can only blow up the Archons if you have such a huge eco lead that you can afford throwing 40 banelings into an army and then everything explodes at the same time. But if you can't clear an Archon, then, well, there's no point in getting more than 10 banelings maybe. So a lot of these banelings are kind of wasted defensive units that could have been more Ravagers. This is a pretty decently sized error, and I'm going to be kind of nitpicky here because, well, let's face it, you're supposed to be pretty good. 4.8k MMR. You see your opponent move on your creep. You have a position with Ravagers and with Banelings. One of the many strengths of the Ravager, and the Ravager really does have very many strengths, is the fact that you can hold ramps extremely easily. The Bile is a great zoning tool, probably about as good as the Force Field or as Storm, honestly. Well, okay, Storm is better. I take the part about the Storm back, but it is a freaking good zoning tool. You can keep this ramp for a little bit, and time is on your side, you know? There's no third base yet. You're up about 20 workers. You're outmining your opponent by 700 minerals a minute. That equals about like 5 spine crawlers, I guess, if you include the cost of the drone as well. So every minute that you stay alive, you can add 5 spine crawlers into this army or into this defense while keeping the same army production as your opponent. Just put that in your mind and think how crazy that is. In 2 minutes from now, you'll have 10 extra spine crawlers, and there's no way this pathetic little army is ever going to be breaking through. Back into the game. So you should have held this ramp. And also these banelings, the moment these zealots walk up like the complete idiots, like they are in this case, these zealots should die immediately. Well, they kind of do die immediately. Your roaches and ravagers are kind of behind. Your queens aren't tanking. And you throw away all of your banelings. Okay, this was a bad fight, but yet you're in a good situation. I'm going to explain to you why this actually was a bad fight, rather than just calling it a bad fight. It's always interesting to know the reasons why. Like I mentioned before, the use of the baneling here is to blow up the zealot. Once you're done with blowing up the zealots, you can save these banelings. Let's go back to our air fryer analogy here, okay? Imagine you want to fry fish sticks in your air fryer, okay? So you fry these fish sticks in your air fryer, you eat the fish sticks in the air fryer, you will still keep the air fryer because it is still working. You will not throw it out saying, well, I ate the fish sticks today, I have nothing to put in my air fryer currently, and thus I will throw my air fryer in the trash. And it's the same with the banelings. You wouldn't do that with an air fryer, you wouldn't do it with the banelings. Your banelings are still in perfectly fine condition. You can just send them over here, save them for the next zealot warp-in, which you know inevitably is going to come. Banelings are your tool at defending the zealots. Your roaches and ravagers and your queens and your spines are the tool at defending absolutely everything else. The archons, the sentries, the immortals. But just the zealots, it's really nice to have banelings against these. Throwing them into this army, look at this. You're barely even doing any damage to this immortals because you're busting through the barrier. And there's really no point. Now these immortals with +1 absolutely ripping through your roaches as well, of course, at this point. And with the zealots tanking, none of these units are really dying either. I still think this is a very playable position for you. I actually believe you're kind of ahead. Getting the baneling speed upgrade at this point is interesting and I think a mistake. I'd much rather have roach speed, which would make kiting easier, rather than baneling speed. Look, your banelings are going to be exploding on top of the zealots. You're not trying to catch High Templar with a flank from the back. It's really not that difficult. Save the gas that you're investing here and put it into more ravagers instead. Put it into roach speed. Hell, get more queens, although those don't cost gas. You also spend some minerals here. You're floating a crap ton of money. You could be building 3 queens at a time and pool all of... This is a brilliant trick that especially lower level Zerg players, and I'm just going to say it, a 4.8k Zerg player apparently also isn't aware of this yet. If you're in trouble, you can pool all your active queens that are currently injecting hatcheries. You inject once with them, then you pull them downstairs and you just build new queens. And that's completely fine. And you can repeat this trick over and over again. And your queen count will continue to grow forever. And you will hardly miss any inject. I think you'll miss 10, 12 seconds or so of an inject round. But because you're spending money on queens, it's most likely fine. Here, once again, the zealots move forward. This time your banelings are stuck behind this massive, fat piece of royalty. Lynx stuck behind your roach army as well. Yeah. So the zealots tanked a lot of the initial shots. And I don't think your transfuses were too hot either. They'll actually need to kind of take it a little bit slower here. So if we count the amount of transfuses available, we see what? There's 3 over here, there's 4 here, there's 2 here, there's 0 here. 4 plus 2 plus 3. Every time I do math, Hamster makes fun of me. I think this is 13. I think we have 13 transfuses. 4, 4, 2, 3. Yeah. Let's count how many you actually use. So this one died without using a single one. That was 4. So out of the 13, we're already missing 4. This one dies with 3. So we're now missing 7. I think I just saw a transfuse be used here. That's 1. That's 2. That's 2. 2. I think 2 or 3 transfuses. It's difficult to count. There could have been a lot more health here on these queens. Or on the roaches, if you want to heal those, of course. Hell, you could even be transfusing Lynx if you really want to, if you're such a tryhard. Still floating a decent chunk of money as well. Might want to just spend it on getting a couple of drones at this point. It's probably worth it. Evo chamber. If you're building an Evo chamber, you're really investing in the far future. I wouldn't mind if you just use it to block units, but actually to get upgrades in your main base. Like, that's 2 minutes away from now. I think you can spend that money more wisely. But at the same time, you're floating so much that maybe it's fine. Getting 9 more banelings. I kind of like getting some banelings. I wouldn't mind seeing some more ravagers. Once again, you're not really guarding the ramp ever either. Which I think is one of the biggest mistakes that you've made so far this game. Oh, now we see the baneling speeds. So they will be useless at high speed. Look at that. It's like driving a Porsche into a wall. At least it was fast. Very nice. Yeah, at this point you're dead. I mean, you have nothing left. His entire army, I mean, he has 5 immortals. He's gonna blast every single roach that you have. And this is basically just because you fight like a bit of a clown. There's really not too much to say about this. Your early game wasn't very tight either. Yeah, I mean, you stay in for a long time as well, man. This is some massive copium here out of you. GG, at least you do GG. Then you leave the game. Wow. Leo wins. What actually was it that you complained about exactly? So you weren't sure what to do. That was the main thing. What would a pro player do? And then you bring up that Australia beat Solar with it in one game. Now, this is one of these things that absolutely pisses me off. Pro players lose all the time to certain strategies, okay? I could, with this type of logic, I could pick one build where Clem beats a player and be like, look, even another pro player couldn't hold Clem's, whatever, eBay block into 2-rex pressure, which isn't a very good build. But just because Clem won with it, then all of a sudden that's an argument. I don't think that is quite how it works, and I don't think it's quite how it's supposed to work. So that's an argument that I immediately will just say, I ain't buying it. What else was there? How is it that I can have complete knowledge of what is coming, but still not be able to stop it? See, like this. Imagine you're boxing against Floyd Mayweather, okay? And he says, I'm going to punch the right side of your head, which is this side of my head. It took a little longer than it should have. And then if you put up your arm on the left side, like this, I'm not quite sure how you're supposed to defend your head in boxing. I never did boxing. And he punches your right side. And then you go, I knew exactly what was happening. I had full knowledge. Yet you knocked me out in one hit. How is that fair? He just laugh at you and probably walk away. Because it's kind of an idiotic thing to do. You had complete knowledge of what was happening, except you didn't really know the move out timing, I guess. But you just didn't respond properly. You took your gases way too early. You built units way too early. You could have built way more drones earlier, getting more money initially, and then later on start producing units. Your queen count was too little. You didn't use the transfuses. You didn't use the ramp control that you had with the Ravagers and Roaches as well. So there's lots of things that you were lacking. The spines were in a truly terrible position. If you can have spines attacking the moment units come onto a ramp, that is a fantastic thing, because then the Protoss is naturally forced to either stutter step forward to kill the spines, moving into your banelings as well, or the Protoss is forced to stand in a small concave on the ramp where not everyone can shoot, and the Immortals will kind of start dancing, kind of behind one another, which altogether is just a bad situation. So honestly, I don't even think you played too bad. Like, some of the things you did were good. I mean, you built units and you realized it wasn't all in. But then at the same time, your micro, your army composition, your build up, your scouting of when the move out was, it just all sucked. And if you're playing against a well-timed all-in, which this was, someone that follows a build order properly, and you don't defend properly, you make 6-7 defense in the defensive execution, that is on you. That is not imbalanced. That is how the game is supposed to function. If you don't know when an all-in is going to hit, and you don't defend properly when you do finally get the knowledge, yeah, you're supposed to die. That's not imbalanced, my friend. That is just you sucking. And that's going to be my verdict for today. And you have to do with that. Thanks all so much for watching. I hope you did enjoy this episode of Is It Imba or Do I Suck? If you did, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I will see all of you next time for new videos just as high quality as this one. So yeah, thank you and bye bye.